This is the unexpected gasp of a queer person. I didn't know she was a twin. I know I'm gonna love it, so I haven't read it yet. And absolutely hefty. So per usual, this will be a spoiler-free March reading wrap-up. January and February, I somehow read 7 books in each of those months. And I think March is not quite over yet, but I believe that I somehow managed to pull it off again. I don't think I've ever been at such a natural pace that is this good, at least not since I was a kid. The first book that I did read this month was I got One Dark Window. This was given to me as a gift, as a Christmas gift actually, and I hadn't seen anything about it anywhere. It is just a duology, which is amazing, and the second one had kind of more recently come out, so people were on TikTok finding this again. I think that is great because I would love to finish a book and then go see what other people thought about it, and like TikTok is so great for that. But I need to read the second one before I'm able to go look up anything about this one. I had no idea what to expect. I knew it kind of had to do with like a magical element that is card-based, which I've definitely never read about before. It's kind of like medieval vibes. One gripe that I just continuously had with this female main character in this medieval vibey book, that is fantasy. If you are gonna pick to make something medieval or like so past fantasy, you don't actually have to make women inferior in that society. Like you can kind of do whatever you want. Like you're writing something completely made up and fictional and fantastical and magical. Just make women equal. Why are we trying to overcome that barrier when we don't have to? This, when I logged it on my story graph, goes as a romance, and I wouldn't go as far as to say that I even think the romance is like first and foremost in this book, or even like one of the top 3 things that I'm into, but I do like the pacing of it, and I think there's certainly going to be more to come in the second book. But like I'm not mad about it at all. You kind of have a main character who is scared to speak her truth, and you're kind of battling with that for the duration of this book, and you're just, as the reader, sitting there like, come on, things would go along a lot smoother or quicker or nicer, or like, don't you realize they would help you if you just were honest with them? So that was kind of like kept feeling like a stumble in the pacing, but I am so excited to see where the rest of this duology heads, and I love me a good duology. I have kind of gotten to this point in my reading life where I have discovered queer fiction is newly popular, and there's such a wealth that I have discovered of it. And I'm at this point where like if I read something that is like in my eyes painfully straight, I've got to balance that out. I just had to. So coming from One Dark Window, I abruptly picked up Cleat. I was at my local library and I was looking for it, and I didn't think they had it, and I was disappointed in them. And then at the very last minute I saw it and I was like, you are coming home with me. And this was such a fun read. It is exactly like the bubbly romantic vibe that you kind of get from the cover. Like that's how you feel when you read this book. You follow 2 young women who are on a New Orleans club, and they also are at different stages in their careers of playing with and for the women's national team. And so these characters are totally fictional, and so are the rest of the teammates, but you cannot help but read this and draw parallels to people that we do know of in celebrity from the women's national team. And I'm not even like a huge soccer buff or a big like knowledgeable expert on that team, but I am a lesbian, so I do know quite a bit about them. But I wouldn't even say as much as some of my friends, and I even had such a great time reading this one and just spending the time with these characters. There is a line in this book where one of the characters says, I don't know if I want to be her or be with her, and that is so relatable. When I read that line, I was just like, this is the I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding for gay people. Like this is the unexpected gasp of a queer person. It is such a good normalization book where nobody's really like battling to come out everybody's just existing. There's this great group of friends who kind of just are all adults, and they just accept each other, and they joke with each other, and they banter with each other, and they're friends, and they're lovely, and they're nice, and they're supportive, and it's women supporting women, and there's a little bit of women not supporting women, but for the most part, like, this is just a really fun, funny, fast-paced, woman-loving woman, soccer romance, rom-com, and I'm here for it. The one thing that I just struggled with, and I don't know that I've had as big of a problem with this in any of my other queer reads so far, but when like 95% of the pronouns in a book are she and her, I do find myself rereading and backtracking because I'm just like, who said what, when, where? I guess maybe just more like character names need to be used, but it's not necessarily a problem I've ever expected to have, but it makes a ton of sense in this setting when it's two women on a women's soccer team who maybe sometimes hang out with other women's soccer teams. This book does touch on mental health, but it kind of like crawls into it, and I do think that the author could have spent a lot more time like diving into that, but kind of just chose to keep it light. I wouldn't have been disappointed if we went a little bit more in that direction. Overall, this was such a fun read. I'm so glad I picked it up. I will be trying to find it and keep my eye out for it to add to my like actual library collection at home, but I'm so glad I checked this one out. Okay, you're not gonna believe me because I just told you how much I'm not truly invested in the women's national team, but my girlfriend was, at the same time that I was reading Cleat Cute, she was reading One Life by Megan Rapinoe, and she really enjoyed it, and I was obviously in the mood after reading Cleat Cute, so I picked it up too. I remember her career in playing and watching her on TV and watching the matches, but I didn't really know much about the parts of her career besides soccer, and every single thing she's kind of fought for or represented, I didn't really know. I just kind of thought she was the player with the pink hair who's won a lot of medals. I think I was just a little bit too young to recognize all of the activism that she is so involved in. It's something that is funny about this is you get so used to reading about Megan, but then she will just name drop other players, and it kind of puts you back in your place of like, oh yeah, that's what I'm reading, this is who we're talking about. And so reading this coming off of Cleat Cute made me kind of like really analyze the characters from Cleat Cute and try to draw the parallels to the descriptions and stuff that we're getting from actual women's national team players in this book. There is a very great line in this one where Megan says, "When I say something rude, I think about who I am saying it for, not who I am saying it to." And I think this sums me up. Like, I am such a bully to bullies, and that is such a great way to put it. You can and you should speak your mind sometimes, and just because you are a woman does not mean that you should not stand up for yourself or others, especially those in similar situations or ones that you can marginally impact and help. But I did not know about her like growing up. I didn't know she was a twin. I didn't know anything about her time playing in Portland. I didn't know like her injury career. The middle section is like pictures and stuff. So like as you're reading and once you get to this section, you can kind of like see the people that she's talking about and see the places she's talking about. And I always love that touch in books like this. It was a great reminder of how successful you can be and how you don't necessarily have to act the way that is expected once you are successful. It made me think a lot about like what people like deserve versus earn and the dynamics between those two things within like your own successes in life, but then also how people perceive your actions through those experiences. And I'm glad I read this. I did not plan to read it, but it was a great pick. The next book that I read for March was Medea by Eilish Quin, which is actually this author's first book. I found this also just by happenstance at the library. It was on like a Women's History Month, celebrating women kind of like end cap display, and I saw this cover and I was like, yeah, that looks interesting. But I had no idea who this character was. I'd never like took notice of her in other stories and whatnot, and like I was a huge Percy Jackson kid growing up. I read Circe by Madeline Miller, and then I was familiar with the story of Jason, but I guess not enough to like retain the information about Medea. This book really makes you think about, are you a product of your circumstances or are you just like evil kind of situation. I think this did spur like a mythology kick. I feel it coming on. I do have A Song of Achilles sitting on my bookshelf, and I've been saving it for a rainy day, like 50% that, 50% just like knowing that it is a book I'm going to love and devour. So I like the opportunity that it just presents sitting there every time I go to pick a new book. Like, does that make any sense? Like, it's so good that I'm saving it. I know I'm gonna love it, so I haven't read it yet. So I think this might be the tipping point to get me to go over and read that. But this book is very fast paced. It starts from like before conception and then goes through Medea's life. And she is basically a witch on an island. It's a lot like Circe. She is related to Circe, and so you will find a lot of parallels there. It is not a fast read. The language is slow and researched, and the names will just throw you for a loop, at least me. But I had a lot of fun reading this, and it kind of just introduced a new character, so to speak, that wasn't on my radar. Glad I found this, glad I read this, and excited to see what Eilish Quin does next, because you can tell that she put a lot of time and research and energy into writing this beautiful, beautiful book. I know. I was told not to read this. I was told I wouldn't like this, but it was the book club pick for the month, so I just had to read it. And I was like, you know what, maybe it'll be okay, because I read Slammed and I really, really liked Slammed. Slammed was a great read. It read like crack, I'll be honest. And this one was written like crack as well, but this was like bad crack. Don't do drugs, kids. If you are going to write about something that is rarely talked about and you would like to do right by that subject or topic, that you should do it kindly and you should do it thoroughly and you should do it carefully. And Colleen Hoover has failed to portray like teen homelessness, abusive relationships, pregnancies within abusive relationships, just a whole bunch of things. She failed to handle them as carefully as I think you should. And it kind of just felt like a grab bag of sensitive subjects that we're hoping stick with people and land with people who have familiar experiences, but we're not worried about taking care of those people. That irked me so much. I'm not even explaining this plot to you because I don't even want you to read it. If you haven't read it, steer clear. If you're a Colleen Hoover fan, you're probably not watching this video. And you're probably never going to watch another one of mine again because I just can't do it. This book just... and I don't think I have anything nice to say, so I should probably just stop talking about it if I'm being honest. So there's that. I am currently reading 2 books that I do think I will finish by the end of March. And this would bring me up to my 7, which is ridiculous, and I'm really hopeful, and I'm so close that I will strive. I've got a couple of days left, but I think I'm gonna push it. Of course, I am reading the 3rd, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is Before Your Memory Fades. It is the same concept of you go and you spend time in this time-traveling cafe, but they kind of pulled a 180 on you and they've switched the location. And I felt like I was just getting everybody's names and roles and relationships to one another from the first 2 books and first 8 stories figured out. And now there's like this wrench in the plan, which I'm sure is great to change up the pace. I am confident that I will finish it by the end of March. And then the last one is an absolute doozy. This is From Hell by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. And this is just an absolutely hefty master edition of this graphic novel that tries to and maybe questionably does solve the Jack the Ripper scenario, which I kind of knew nothing about going into this. And this book is graphic. Like, it is violent and it is horrible and it is gnarly and it is scary. You will dream about it. I was told, and I think I was told correctly, like, you should absolutely get the mastered colored edition of it because the art is just really, really cool. But I think it would be not significantly less cool in black and white. At least my little pea brain likes the tiny bit of color. And it's still a very visibly dark book. Like, the color is such a choice and such an element through this that it's an entirely different aspect, and I think a completely different reading experience. I will read your She-Hulk, I will read your Spider-Man, I will read your Paper Girls, I will read Winona Earp, but like a big chunky guy like this is usually just something I don't even know where to begin with. I need to crank the rest of this out through the weekend, but I'm so incredibly excited to finish this and then look at all of the research that they did to write this and come up with this story and these characters who actually are just real people, and see what other people on the internet have to say about this, because I know it's well talked about. I think I will start April off intentionally with Two Twisted Crows, which is the second book in Rachel Gillig's One Dark Window duology, the Shepherd King duology. I finally finished the Before the Coffee Gets Cold ones, like consecutively. I think that's really cool. I had a great soccer reading month. And then I hauled quite a few books this month and just absolutely scored at our local bookstores and used book spots. And so I have quite a few things that were never on my radar and quite a few things that I've been looking for a while. And this is a month where like I have no idea what is coming up because I just have too many options, which is a great place to be at. I will also be posting a collective book haul. So maybe as I do that, I will figure out what else is in my April TBR. I guess we're just gonna see if I continue the trend of reading 7 books every month, because if I can keep doing that, my mind is blown as to how many books I can and will read. And if I don't do it, it's okay. If I don't get 7, it's okay. But even 5 is a great number. 6 is a great number. But like, I just want 3 7s. So that's where I'm at. And I will see you in April.